Hello ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond. My name is Taylor and welcome to the first impressions video for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now for full disclosure, I have played this game for about 2 hours on the EA Play Pro program. That's a mouthful. Meaning that I did not purchase the game outright. I did pay a subscription service to EA to be able to play it realistically in full, but I specifically chose to play it for the first 2 hours because that is the metric that Steam uses to allow you to file for a refund. Now, I do that because I don't know what the refund policies for EA, GOG, Xbox, or other launcher platforms are, but I do know for a fact that Steam's is 2 hours, and if I find another platform that the game is available on that is less than 2 hours, that will be my next benchmark, because I want to highlight the experience you'll have in those 2 hours to know whether this game is right for you. Now, another thing to get out of the way is this game is said to have issues. Now, I have not personally experienced those issues, or if I have not noticed them. I'm not normally one who cares too much about FPS as long as it's in like the 50 to 60 range, but if it's not there, I don't always notice necessarily. If it's under 50, I typically notice, and I've been hearing a lot about the frame rate issues of this game in particular on PC, but I did not notice that myself when I played it. Now, that could be due to a day one patch, I'm not 100% sure, and I will link in the description down below a video by my great friend John, who went over the performance on his PC before day one launch. So please check out that video if you're worried about the performance on your system. Note that I have a 2070 Super as my graphics card, and just, I think, a mid-range PC in terms of other specs. So I was not running it at 1440p, I know a lot of people do. I was running it at 1080p because, again, I don't care too much about that kind of stuff, so that may be where I'm getting a little more performance, and others were not. With that being said, this is obviously the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, which I have played through its entirety, gotten all achievements for. Only took me about 20 hours in anticipation of this game releasing. And as soon as I booted it up, it looked gorgeous, but then it threw me into a whole series of things, you know, optimizing it for my computer specifically. Now, I don't know what it actually changed from its base settings to say, hey, this is how you should run it on your computer, but it did, so that may have made a difference, I don't know. And then it threw me into minutes of cutscene and setup. Now, I normally advocate hugely for story in games. I think it's a great thing to have, and Jedi Fallen Order absolutely had story that Jedi Survivor seems like it's going to pick up, though in the first 2 hours hasn't really touched on all that much. You start out as Cal Kestis, the same character from the first game, but 5 years later from those events depicted. Now, it opens with you getting captured and then this big walking scene throughout Coruscant. And I gotta be upfront, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. I more played it for his Souls-like combat and aspects in that regard. So for me, it wasn't maybe the eye candy or Easter egg that it will be for some people if you're more into the Star Wars universe. But after a long walking scene, you're handed to a senator, and you know this is a setup. You know that you're not actually captured and that you're just gonna break free. But it still takes, I think it was like 6 minutes or something to get there. Like, it is a long, long time. And that's honestly my biggest problem with the first 2 hours of the game is I played for 1 hour 51 minutes, so a little under that 2 hour mark, but that is 111 minutes. And then I broke it down in my editing software. I had, I kid you not, just over 30% of my time as cutscenes. Now, I have the math and I forgot to pull it up here, but that was, and it's kind of funny when I did this. I did the math and I had 69% of my 2 hours, or 1 hour 50 minutes if you want to be super particular, as gameplay. The rest of that was cutscenes. Now, again, I advocate heavily for cutscenes. These are really well animated, they're really well voiced, and I really appreciate them, but it's a lot. Now, I will say that does include the opening recap of the first game that it gives you right when you boot up the game to start off, before it gives you the main menu, because your first time experience with the game, you know, you may skip it once you boot up the game a second time, but that first time around, you don't know what's going to be in there, so you want to watch it in its entirety to see what it's showing you. There are over 36 minutes of cutscene in the first 2 hours. Now, to me, that is a lot, and I don't know, as I haven't gone past the first 2 hours, how much more of the game is going to be cutscene, though I imagine there's going to be a fair... That being said, I think all these cutscenes are really interesting. They add a lot to Cal's character, to the story of what's going on. At least for the most part, some of them are a little... They're there just to really help you soak in the scenery, so for some people that'll be better than others. but it's a lot to really pack into that first 2 hours when you're deciding, is this game right for me? And I don't think I'm the happiest about that. Now, that being said, let's actually get into what those cutscenes are looking at. So, like I said, you play as Cal, you're supposedly captured, you break free, and then you find out the crew that captured you is actually part of the resistance movement that you were working with back on Kashyyyk in the first game under Saw Gerrera. Now, for those of you who have seen the, I guess, new trilogy, I don't know what they're calling it these days. I never saw episode 9. But yeah, you would know his character from both the new trilogy and the Rogue One movie. That's the movie. He was played by Forrest Whitaker. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. So Cal has been working for them for the last few years fighting the Empire, and you work with your crew, who apparently have a lot of experience with one another. We are also introduced to the new member of the crew, Boga, at least I think that's his name, I can't quite remember, who introduces a new game mechanic that we'll be discussing shortly. Anyway, you guys follow this senator after he tries to escape, steal the information from him, then, spoiler alert, the ninth sister, who was a boss from the first game you thought you killed, comes back and effectively kills 75% of your crew, or around there. Anyway, there's a couple people left alive after she attacks. You then have to traverse more of Coruscant to find her, fight her, defeat her, finally ending her life. And then you go on with Boga, if I remember correctly, and Bravo. Yes, the guy's code name or actual name is Bravo. They don't really give him any more characterization beyond that. And during the escape, Boga has to peel off to drag away some fighters, Bravo dies, and you're left in the Mantis, the ship from the first game, in a severely damaged state. So you start going to the second planet, which I can't remember the name of, to try to find Grease as he set up a cantina there, in the hopes that he can repair your ship. Now, I didn't actually get any farther in the story during the 2 hours, though I did spend some time on the second planet, gameplay-wise, which you'll be seeing, so that's as far as I got with everything. But I do want to discuss the changes in gameplay, as I think they're a really great idea and a very welcome change. So first of all, you have almost all of your force powers from the first game immediately accessible to you, and you can use them how you did in the first game. So for those of you who have played the first game kind of shortly before this one came out like I did, it'll just feel like a continuation and expansion on that. For those of you who haven't played it since it released originally, it may be a little more of a learning curve for you. That being said, you immediately have access to your double lightsaber, your force pull, your force push. You now have Jedi mind tricks to use, I would assume, during cutscenes, as there is a section where you Jedi mind trick the senator and you get dialogue choices to tell him, you know, either you trust us or we're going to reward you for this, to see how you need to manipulate someone, so that could be really interesting. And you can also use it in combat to make people fight each other. It's kind of one of those, bring that enemy over to my side, except you can do it with more than just droids, you can do it with organics as well. On top of that, you have, though I didn't unlock them all, 5 different lightsaber stances. So you have your original one, which is just, you know, single blade, single hand lightsaber. You have your double-sided lightsaber. You now have the ability to dual wield them, which you unlock during your fight with the second sister. Then I also am aware of the other 2, one involving a saber in one hand and a blaster in the other, and the final one being kind of a two-handed on a single blade lightsaber with much more heavier strikes, similar to a claymore sword. Now again, I didn't unlock all of these 5, I only unlocked the first 3, that being the regular, double-bladed, and dual-wield. Now, with that being said, you can only equip 2 at a time, which I think is reasonable, because it would be ridiculous to try to swap between 5 different stances, say for different enemy types or different things. So I appreciate being limited to 2, because it really helps you hone in on what gameplay style you want to focus on. In addition to that, the traversal has been heavily improved in my opinion. It gives you more options for traversal. You can now climb on ceilings by just kind of hanging from bars and stuff, but it also sped it up exponentially. Like, I remember in the last game, again, I got all achievements, so it was it was quite the experience, but the climbing was so slow before you got the claws on Dathomir, and I was just crawling, and it was so painful. But now, all the climbing is super speedy, you can get where you need to go really fast, and it's really appreciated. In addition to that, part of the way through Coruscant, you get a grappling hook. Yes, a grappling hook, because what game doesn't have a grappling hook at this point? It kind of acts like an additional force pull. You know, you can pull yourself to farther ledges and do other stuff that you would normally do with a grappling hook. I have not found a use for it in combat, though I didn't try it out. I think it kind of replaces force pull at some aspects of traversal, but is then replaced by force pull during combat, so I don't know if it later comes into use with combat, but for when I played, it did not. The final thing I wanted to talk about this part of the gameplay section is the addition of a companion. So for the first level of Coruscant, it's Boga, I think that was his name, and he kind of acts like a bounty hunter. So he has a jetpack, he has a blaster. You can direct him to attack opponents for you or maybe take aggro. You can also ask him to do certain things in the environment, like shooting something down so you can use the cable that was holding it up, or moving a sign for you so you can wall run across it. Now, I do know from watching other reviews and seeing later gameplay that the number of companions you can have is always 1, but the number of people to fill that slot, I think, is 3 or 4, because you can have Boga, you can have Marin from the first game, and a couple other people. I don't remember everyone who was involved in that, but it feels like it would really vary up the gameplay, and I appreciate that. And then the final change I wanted to discuss is the skill trees. These have been massively both expanded and reined in some instances. So you have one survivor skill tree that focuses on, how much health you have in total, how much health your stim packs give you, and other things related to your survivability, hence the name Survivor. With your force powers, you have 3 trees, one for push, one for pull, and one for Jedi mind tricks. Now, it's kind of weird because those are the overarching tree names, but in those trees you have multiple skills to deal with the named skill, but also like your maximum force energy or different applications of force powers under that kind of heading. So it's really expanded from the first game, which had just 3 small branches, and I think will really help you focus on the style of play that you want. And finally, of course, we have to talk about the lightsabers. There are now 5 lightsaber skill trees because there are 5 lightsaber stances that I've already listed. Now each stance gets its own skill tree, which I think is great because it lets you focus on the 2 or maybe 3 that you want and really build them out to play the way that you feel best suits your combat style. It also allows for massive experimentation and variation on what you want to do. Now, when you're not using these powers, you're going to be exploring the world, and as I've said, the traversal and climbing things is really improved, but also the holo map is really much clearer, and I appreciate that. So you have a much better idea of where you can, where you can't go, and what area is kind of the optional area. I always found myself in the first game going along the intended path when I thought I was going along the unintended path looking for secrets, and then I would miss out on stuff and have to go back for it. And speaking of going back for something, thank God they added fast travel to this game, because that was such a pain in the ass before, where they designed the levels that you could, go from point A to point B all the way around to point C and then back to point A, but it was such a slog to have to run through everything. Here, you can just fast travel between bonfires, or meditation points as they're called in the game, and it's going to make backtracking for collectibles and things so much easier. All in all, I felt like this was a great sequel in terms of what it gives the player gameplay-wise, visuals-wise, in terms of how it looks, and I really hope that it has more to offer than the first game, because again, I completed that 100% achievements, all that jazz, in about 20 hours. Now, I don't know if How Long to Beat has anything up for the game, as it just launched today, but I do feel that your mileage will vary, as I'm going to say this a lot, with this game, especially depending on how much of a Star Wars fan you are. And according to How Long to Beat, it'll take about 20 hours to maybe 25, so it doesn't seem too out of line with the first game. And at that point, it's really a question that you gotta ask yourself, am I comfortable paying what I believe is gonna be $90 Canadian on Steam for a 20-hour experience? I think if you love Star Wars, if you loved the first game, it's gonna be worth it to you. But I think if you were kind of meh on the first game, or you picked it up later like I did, then it may not be enough there to keep you satisfied for the price you're going to be paying. Along with the graphics issues that it's been packaged with, I think it's going to be a wait for a sale or wait for a patch on my end. Again, I had a great experience with those 2 hours. I had a lot of fun, but I can't in good conscience recommend a 20-hour game for almost $100 Canadian or your regional equivalent when it has so many issues that people have pointed out and may not run really well in your system. But that's why I make these videos. I, again, have access to Xbox Game Pass on PC, to the EA Play Pro app. I hate saying that whole thing. But those kinds of subscription services let me try out these games for 2 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, whatever I feel like putting into them for a monthly fee as opposed to paying for each game and trying it out that way. So if you found this helped you at all, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share the video around. Tell people that this is the experience they'll be getting beyond those graphics issues, beyond the problems that are being touted by it. But be aware of those problems, because I don't want the discussion to be purely around, oh, these are all the problems that it shipped with. I want it to be, hey, this is the game that they made, this is the story they're trying to tell, but it has these issues as well. In addition to the good, there is the bad. I don't want it to focus on just the good and ignore the issues, or focus on just the bad and ignore the game at its core. With all that being said, thank you, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between, so much for watching. I hope to come out with a Redfall review not quite as soon after release, as I will be preoccupied at the time of its actual release, but I promise you I will try to get out a few days after its release. Look forward to that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Whoa. Take a look at that view. Is that a giant crater? Wow. I got it so easy. Guard the cliff, crush the locals, look at the scenery. Nobody's getting past me, not without a blaster hole in him. I wonder if I'll get promoted for doing such a good job. Then I'll get the other droids to guard the cliff. Oh, but then I won't see the scenery. Now that's a dilemma.
Dilemma solved.